Hello, and welcome to the Specialty Matcha Podcast. My name is Ryan. This is my co-host Zongjun,
Hello, hello.
and we're the co-founders of Senko Matcha Products.
Yeah, we launched this podcast to discuss our learning journey in matcha, share startup stories, and interview experts. And today we are happy to have Monique from Matcha Moments.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks so much for being on. Could you tell us a little bit, sort of about your background and Matcha Moments and sort of the mission of that page?
So I'm Monique. I actually have a background in the arts. I was trained
Cool.
as a classical music singer, and for
Oh,
a big chunk of my life, I've dedicated it towards the performing arts. For about a decade, I was also a music teacher and a vocal coach. But in 2020, when COVID hit, I had a major transition when I started this online education platform, which provides after school services and programs to students. And that's when I discovered this joy and passion for entrepreneurship. So
Hmm.
I realized that I love the challenge. I love it when I'm able to give solutions to different problems. And now I've embraced the life of an entrepreneur. For Matcha Moments, it actually started as a YouTube channel. It's still there. It was a space for me to journal my daily experiences, reflections about life and my existence. So I would upload videos of me doing my daily matcha ritual. And because of that, I get to consume matcha every day. But this year, I shifted Matcha Moments into a business of selling matcha. Initially, it was just reselling matcha, famous matcha brands from Japan. That was the
mhm.
easy way. So I was just reselling it. But then when I dove deeper into the world of matcha, I saw this need for local cafes and businesses to have access to matcha they can use for business purposes. Because the matcha that we resell from Japan are quite expensive and not very attractive to be used for business. So
Mm.
that's why it's more these popular matcha brands are more popular with home users and not very popular or just starting to get popular with cafe use. And so I saw this need for to be able to provide matcha for these businesses. That's why I focused on providing authentic matcha to cafes and restaurants. And that's where Matcha Moments is right now. It's basically a matcha supplier for cafes and food businesses.
Very interesting. So, Monique, you are based in the Philippines. So can you share to our audience a little bit of what's the matcha scene like in the Philippines? And do you see a lot of single origin or single cultivar matcha in the Philippines? What do people usually drink, or what do they like?
In the past few years, matcha definitely became popular in the Philippines. Nowadays, you can see matcha drinks offered in the menu of almost every cafe.
Mm.
But authentic matcha, the use of matcha as, or the idea of matcha as tea is still just getting started. Many still know matcha as a flavor, not really as tea. Like, for example, when I started to sell matcha and I went to visit different cafes, most of them would have a first experience with matcha as tea, and they would be surprised that it's actually tea. It's the same as the tea that we enjoy, but this one is powdered. So
Interesting.
it's a very interesting thing for me to experience. And matcha again is pure authentic matcha is expensive here. And so many cafes and food businesses find it hard to switch to using pure powdered matcha, powdered tea, from this flavored powdered mix, flavored matcha mix. So even the specialty coffee cafes, some of them still use this flavored powdered mix only. And so that's why the authentic matcha is mostly popular for home users than the cafes. But I've seen many specialty coffee shops switch to using pure matcha. And some of them would be one problem that I see is many vendors would sell cheap matcha and put the marketing of ceremonial to this cheap matcha. So many of these local cafes would be using this marketing term as well, that they're using ceremonial grade when they don't really know what it means, or
Mm.
at least not giving any information to their customers what ceremonial grade really means. So definitely matcha has progressed here in the Philippines, but the use of pure matcha is just getting started.
Interesting. Do you think it's more of a push or a pull? Are like the consumers trying to
Mm.
demanding matcha, pulling it out of businesses, out of vendors, saying we want a higher quality product? Or is it people like tea people or people who love Japanese tea or those vendors trying to sell a better and higher quality matcha to change consumers' perception of what is good matcha? Is it more consumer driven or is it more like vendor driven? These changes in your observation.
Sure, but I believe it it's very much influenced by the price, because
Mm.
um, that's why when I started this matcha business, I was able to uh, see a breakthrough when it comes to shift to using pure tea. Again, it's more popular with home users right now. The local cafes, of course, they know the value of using high quality ingredients, and that's what is good for local cafes. And I truly believe that these cafes and food businesses will be the true ambassadors of matcha,
Yeah.
because they know the importance of using quality ingredients, and they have the passion, they have the platform, they also have the audience. And so that's why I'm focusing with business owners and local cafes. But I think it's very much driven by, currently, it's very much driven by the price. And that's why I want to give more tea education, so that people will not just value the price, but also
Mm.
the story behind much.
Very interesting. How do you really, structure, your education content, and when you approach to, businesses or regular consumers, or people just like matcha or want to learn more about matcha? What's your methodology, and do you have like priorities in, educating
I'm
consumers?
still working on that, because I'm actually a newbie in the world of matcha. So I'm learning more every day. And my content, especially in social media, was focused on crafting matcha drinks,
Mm.
because I'm working with cafes who are using it for the first time. So I have to give them something to start with. I recently find that there are many who do that already. So you'd find social media influencers and matcha companies offering recipes,
Mhm.
featuring different recipes, and so many people already do this. So I'd love to focus more on tea education, but I'd love to package it in a way that would use coffee knowledge structure, what we already have and experience with coffee, and then connect that to matcha, so that matcha would not be such a foreign thing, like it's very
Yeah.
alien. It's still very new, and I believe sometimes I try to take a step back and just imagine I'm a very new matcha consumer and I don't know anything about it. So I usually get the questions like, what's the difference between ceremonial and culinary, or these stuff that are very true. If you don't know anything about matcha, you'd be like, what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the most successful specialty product in the Philippines is coffee. I'd love
Mhm.
to use that success or that maybe tap on that knowledge structure and then apply it to matcha so that it will be more relatable and people will not find it very very alien. That's my focus for the next content that I will be sharing on social media.
Cool. That's cool. We were in the Philippines for the first time in 2018, and I remember we were looking for specialty coffee shops to work out of, and
Yeah.
we're really into that scene. And I think it was somewhere in Makati. We found a really fantastic local roaster, and kind of became our office for the week. But it was uh, at least by our perception, in the places we had traveled to, it's Manila seemed to be really advanced specialty coffee culture
Mhm.
compared to a lot of other places, even was that over 5 years ago
Yeah,
now.
because when we were in Bangkok, it wasn't,
Yeah, Bangkok at that time in 2019, there was some matcha, but it wasn't like everywhere like it
Yes.
is now.
Mhm, mhm.
Like these things are happening fast, and
Yeah, really fast.
really curious to see how that evolves. And I think you're right. Through cafes, they have the platform already.
Yeah, they already have this appreciation for high quality product and definitely they would be the most influential, I believe. You'll be able to reach more people through the platform of local cafes, and that's why I'd love to work with these people more.
Monique, you have a very interesting perspective in a way that you told us that you are also a Urasenke practitioner
Yeah.
and you have this performing art background. Somehow I can see the connection between these two, and
Mm.
also right now you're into specialty matcha. What's the Urasenke community like in the Philippines? And you travel quite far of a distance in terms of commuting time to study Urasenke. It's quite a commitment. Can you maybe share a little bit about like what's your experience and how do you what did you learn and what's the community like over there?
The Urasengi community in the Philippines is quite active. So there
Mm.
are they hold multiple sessions throughout the week.
Wow, very frequent.
Currently, there's 3 sessions, 3 schedules per week, and then they hold public demonstrations and host tea gatherings open to the public every year. But currently, it's just located in one city. City where you went to, it's in Makati.
In
So
Makati.
only those who live nearby can join. And when it comes to specialty matcha as a specialty product, I don't see the Urasenke community in the Philippines pushing for that because the focus of the group is to practice and to for the philosophy and the preservation of this Japanese tea, the art of that Japanese tea ceremony. So definitely matcha is is just a part of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I actually joined the Urasenke community because I want to learn more about matcha. We're taught how to handle it, how to respect it, but it's just part of the practice. It's not the it's it's not the highlight. The tea education as a product is not the focus of the group. It's more
Yeah.
of the practice of the art of the Japanese tea ceremony. So definitely, if you want to learn about matcha as a product, um, it will be you'd not be experiencing much of that if you join the Urasenke and practice Chanoyu.
Yeah,
So
both
that's what I
Ryan and I
learned.
came from a Omoto Senke background, and
Mm,
it's indeed you learn the usage of matcha, how to handle matcha in a ceremonial way, but not necessarily matcha itself.
yes.
I bet a lot of people join Channel U because of they want to learn about more matcha.
Tea, yeah,
Yeah,
the tea
learn about
Yeah.
itself.
tea.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's never
sometimes
really been the focus.
sometimes when some of my friends would ask, how do I join the Urasenke school? Because I know they're very much into matcha. I usually tell them beforehand that it will be a separate thing. So you would not expect much about the tea education. Expect more of a cultural immersion than than the uh, tea education itself. So, but some of them still join, of course.
I mean, it's still very fun, very cool.
Very fun to be a guest.
Yeah.
It's a gateway towards a lot of Japanese culture and art. It's
Yep.
really a amalgamation of calligraphy and traditional art and everything. And also,
Yes.
you drink matcha at the end in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
2 hours in, finally we can sip matcha.
I love the idea of the Japanese tea ceremony. I mean, idea itself. That's why I got into matcha.
Yeah.
I love the experience of being very present and involving all of your senses with hearing the sound of the water touch the bowl and the aroma of matcha when the water hits it. It's a very relaxing experience. And for me, it's an amazing mindfulness exercise. That's why that's what got me started with matcha. My passion for it. It's the idea of the Japanese tea ceremony as a mindfulness exercise. So yeah, I still promote the traditional preparation of matcha if you want to use it in that sense. If your intention is very clear that this is how you want to experience matcha in a very mindful way, then definitely go for it.
I really like the intentionality of it too. It's like how the economy of movements, and there's like never a wasted movement or step, and
Yes.
like how the guest or the host will never turn their back to the guest unless it's like taking out the wastewater bowl. So it really forces you to be present as a student. Like it's just layers and layers of learning about this hidden intentionality. It's really hard to. It's really easy to gloss over that and not even notice. When you learn it, it's. I think that's something that I've noticed in a lot of like the thing that separates like a good matcha program from a bad matcha program at a cafe in particular is the concept of economy of movements. Like where is everything being placed? If where is it placed if it's dirty or clean? And like a lot of these setups, you have all this crossover of wet powder, dry powder, powder spilled everywhere, dribble spilled everywhere. And the really good ones, it's not only do they have economy of movement where it's very efficient, but you don't have all this mess that can happen when it's not like pre-planned. Um,
Yeah.
I
Interested
really,
in learning more about that because again, I work with cafes and I don't really that didn't really come into my mind like giving them suggestions on how they set up their ma-
Yeah.
uh, matcha workspace. So yeah, maybe we can try to think of ways on how to make it better with a setup of cafes. Maybe you can share. What do you think is best?
we did a podcast with Jev from MTCH in Bangkok,
Oh,
and he has a very interesting philosophy around this. And the workstation for all three of his cafes are identical to the centimeter, so that like any himself or any of the baristas could probably blindfolded like prepare a drink because everything's muscle memory. I like Chano you. Like I found like
Yeah.
all like the like a lot of my teachers, I'm like very confident that they could do it blindfolded.
yeah.
Like they know because everything is the same. Like I remember being corrected and said, no, you need to move it like 2 more centimeters this way.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
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 Interesting. In this way, probably a lot of modern cafes can learn from this very traditional art that had been perfected for centuries. I think that's something that instead of retrofitting the equipment being used,
you retrofit the process.
the process. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how they would be able to set that up, knowing that there will be, of course, a big um, machine for the espresso. And some of these cafes don't have that much space, but
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah, definitely the matcha space would usually look sad and empty. So uh, I would love to explore that idea more and maybe help elevate their matcha workspace.
Yeah, there's the economy of space too.
Yeah, economy of space. It's true.
Uh-huh.
I had to adapt it. Right now, it's a neglected little corner, unfortunately, in a
Yeah,
lot of.
with a lot of very sad looking utensils.
As you approach these different coffee businesses, what messaging have you gone in to try to sell to one of these businesses or get them to have higher quality matcha didn't work very well? And what's messaging that's been very successful? Like beyond it's a higher quality ingredient, how does that what is the context you need to share with someone to get them to make a decision that yes, we want to promote high quality matcha, specialty matcha. We want to level up our matcha program so it's on the same level of how much we care about the coffee. How does that conversation go, and how does it go good or how does it go poorly?
Usually, I approach it in a way of featuring the profit that they can get.
Okay.
For example, currently I offer three types of matcha: the low tier, the mid tiered, and the most expensive one. Not really very expensive. I priced it for business use. So I give them the costing, how much will be the matcha per drink, how much will be the cost of matcha per drink, and then add in all their other costs and what will be profit margin for each. So usually that's how I'm able to sell the idea that you can actually still earn a good profit by using pure matcha instead of using the flavored powder.
Remix.
Yeah. And usually one of the things that make them really do the shift is to taste it. So I do tea tasting,
Okay.
and then assemble the matcha there then and there, and let them taste the difference. Sometimes if they would have an available matcha mix there, I don't usually do that, but they would know the difference. That it's totally different because most of the cafes that I go to, it's the first time that they would experience pure matcha tea.
Mm.
So um, most most likely I'm able to change their mind. I also give, if the cafes are far from me, I give them samples and then give them a guide on how to do the tea tasting, very specific, so that they can recreate the same experience I want them to experience when they taste the teas. And most likely, these cafes would change their mind and shift to using pure matcha and offer it in their menus. So that's the thing. I gave tea tastings or give tea samples. I send samples to these cafes, and then they experience it themselves. It's very important that these business owners experience and taste it. That's how I usually do it.
That's interesting. My girlfriend used to sell fine chocolate in Hong Kong from a French company, and I was asking her about what that was like she was selling to a lot of nicer hotels or nice restaurants, and I'm like, and it was like single origin chocolate, very well processed, and I was like, okay, what was the sales pitch to these people? And she was like, price.
Yes.
And then part two is and then tasting.
Uh,
It seems
Yeah.
like how a lot of these B2B type sales and relationships start. It's like one,
yeah.
is
I
it
also
economically viable?
Yeah. I also experienced. I learned it. I learned it the hard way that I approach cafes who are not very much into this fast-paced serving. Like
Mm.
I
Okay.
I can remember there's this one cafe I approached and I said, "Would you like to try your matcha?" And then said, "Oh, just send your samples because it's in the city where I live." So I said, "I can go there and do the tasting, but please help me with the water, with the ice, and these materials." And then the cafe told me, "We don't give you this much time, and just give us the samples." And I'm like, "I have to prepare it in front of you and do show you how it's done." So I just took a step back and looked at the cafe, and it's this very fast paced cafe who offers cheaper drinks. I realized that these are the cafes that would not fit or at least for now, would not accept the idea of using high quality ingredients because they're more into fast paced.
They're prioritizing quantity, definitely.
Yes, more of the quantity than the quality. So I've shifted my focus to approaching specialty coffee cafes, or those cafes whom I think would would have more appreciation using high quality ingredients like pure matcha.
Based on the preferences of the local market, do you think people in the Philippines are more or less likely to like the really umami heavy profiles, or do you think they'd be more like the roasty toasty yame style? Like, what's the local preference like in terms of just flavor? Because we learned in Bangkok that like people like the umami quite a bit, which was a surprise. And like mainland China, it's like
Definitely
no
roasty
no one
toasty.
no one likes the umami.
Well, coming from my experience selling matcha, I sell matcha from Yame. So
Oh,
most
Okay.
okay.
most of the uh, most of the cafes I approach, 100% would really love the profile
Mm,
Okay.
when
Oh,
used
interesting.
in latte form. Even in usucha, in usucha form, they love the toasty profile of Yame matcha. So definitely, I cannot remember any other vendors who sell Yame matcha here. So I cannot really give comparison, but for the profile that I'm able to give with matcha from Yame, they most of the cafes really love it, and of course their customers like it as well. So maybe in the Philippines, the preference is more for this toasty Yame matcha than rather than the umami forward matcha of the other place in Japan.
that's awesome.
Is a lack of bitterness very important? We've done a lot of consumer testing and collected quite a bit of data on consumer preferences in the Philippines, and we noticed that compared to a lot of other markets, there was a real sensitivity towards bitterness.
Yeah,
Um, and most of the context seemed to be very negative,
Mm.
but curious at how that translates in matcha.
Well, I was surprised this past few days because I've been giving some samples of this matcha that has more bitterness. It's a second harvest matcha.
Hmm.
So I wasn't expecting people, especially the home users who are used to using the popular Japanese matcha brands, to like this profile of more bitterness. Maybe it's because of the profile of Ayame matcha. uh, but I was surprised that so many people like it in latte form. And they like the bitterness because it cuts through the milk and all the other sweeteners they although all the other ingredients used for latte, and more, even in the cafe they really love this matcha with a little bit of bitterness because the flavor, especially for latte, the flavor was able to cut through the other latte ingredients. So
Okay.
mm,
I had a very interesting experience this past few days with this kind of matcha. So
very interesting.
Ah, yeah, that
Mm.
is interesting. Well, I can totally see that working, like balancing out a
Yeah,
beverage.
or offer some kind of structure to the overall flavor profile with
Yeah.
some
yeah.
bitterness.
Especially if the status and if like the status quo is mostly these pre-mixes, they
Mm,
add like a lot of other flavors in those pre-mixes too. It's not just the matcha flavor.
yes.
So it's interesting where you have something that's like with a lot of strength that's almost an ingredient that holds up to that holds its own and then doesn't kind of get masked. Oh, that's cool. We've been talking more and more about that, how a lot of this matcha evaluation is done without milk. And it's just so far away from the way like the majority of the world loves drinking their matcha. And
Yeah.
like everyone's tasting notes, like it's, I don't like my matcha with milk. So like I less personally don't resonate it, but from a consumer centric standpoint, it's like surprising to me that not more sensory analysis and product evaluation or product optimization. Like
Mm.
people make barista grade matcha, but why isn't anyone like really leveraging the like full spectrum of quality of ingredients and then like specifically optimizing for milky context? Because
Wow.
it seems
Yeah.
to be where like that's where people are at. Like it's
Yes.
it's
This might be a little difficult because milk might taste very different from country to country.
that's so true.
Mm, yep.
Yeah.
I I remember when I started my matcha journey, I always consume usucha or sometimes goicha.
Mm.
And then I do not want to use matcha for latte because I feel that it's such a waste to use matcha, this precious matcha for adding milk and other ingredients. But when I shifted to a matcha business, I had to learn how to drink latte because I have to learn how to the best ratios for this specific matcha that I sell. I had to drink latte every day, not just once, twice, sometimes four times to recalibrate. And I
It's a
would
lot.
drink the latte because I feel it's such a waste to throw it.
No, wow, that's a lot. A lot of milk too.
Yeah, so currently I think that's why more people appreciate this bitterness because we're still very young. We're still a newbie in when it comes to tasting this tea. And so right now, stands out will be: is this latte flavorful? Do I enjoy it? Right now, that seems to be the case. It should be, especially for people who are not very particular with their taste, with the taste
Yeah,
of the matcha. It just has to be enjoyable. So
yeah.
right now, as we are introducing pure tea and pure authentic matcha to the Philippine cafes, it seems that it's this is it right now. We just have to work with what is a flavorful and tasty matcha latte, and what will be the matcha that suits this preference of consumers.
I've noticed too in tasting some of the lattes, especially in Bangkok and in Thailand, that the base drink, like when you go to MTCH, you can choose different matcha to be mixed in different latte contexts. The variety of flavor expression is enormous. Like some will taste like chocolate, some taste like very umami, some are like toasted nuts and very nutty when mixed with it. And I was in North Thailand in Chiang Mai, and I met Tom from Chaseki, and he had an Uji Hikari cultivar gelato, and I tasted it. It completely changed my perspective of milk plus matcha, or milk, in this case, milk and sugar frozen plus matcha. It had very little bitterness, which I thought was kind of like a no-no when it came to mixing matcha and milk, but it was packed with umami. It was the first like full-bodied umami koicha tasting. I don't really have quite the right word. Matcha gelato I've ever had. And the more I taste, there's like a lot of room to explore too
Mm.
within that realm by I guess using different matcha from different places or different regions or I guess even different seasons to play around with that flavor expression and to get something. But like one of these drinks that I had in Thailand, honestly, if you put a blindfold on me and you asked me what am I drinking, I would have said, I don't know, frozen hot chocolate. I wouldn't have even said it. And I mean that really as a compliment. Like it was a very is wild. I don't know. It's there's a lot to be explored
Yeah, the
there.
diversity of flavor is pretty crazy.
Yes, here in the Philippines, I don't see that much exploration when it comes to matcha and its different profiles, like especially for specialty matcha, like single origin or single cultivar matcha. It's still a very new concept. Uh, even with those who use matcha at home, many still do not know the cultivated varieties used for matcha and do not know that there will be different expression of and profiles depending on the cultivated variety that they use. But I remember there's this cafe in the southern part of Metro Manila. They try to explore different matcha food products. And last July, they offer this nori, seaweed infused matcha latte. And of course, you already have an idea of how it would taste like. But this one's interesting because they put salted caramel sauce in it. And
Ooh.
Oh,
it's a very interesting experience. Loved it. I would like to try it again. But I would love to see more of these happening in the cafes here in the Philippines. This exploration of different ways to prepare and serve matcha food products. Because currently it's more of the usual pairings for latte, and I'd love to see more of the exploration of these different kinds of matcha products.
Yeah. Probably will bring a lot of new consumers into the market because it's getting them a product that they say, "Oh yeah, I like this," and then they want to try more matcha. It's
Yeah.
like the top of the discovery funnel is like interest through something else, and then
mhm.
actually, in a way, like
Fundamentally.
China is kind of like that too. Like
Yeah.
you're
Oh
interested
yeah.
in like Japanese traditional culture, and then you learn more about whatever it is. Pick your topic,
Mhm.
like the
Uh,
ceramics, the lacquerware, the
Calligraphy,
calligraphies,
chabana,
yeah, or tea.
or tea.
yeah.
Cool.
I just want to know where you are at when it comes to the matcha mill because I'm very much excited about any updates where you are at right now.
Yeah, we are in the development of prototype number 2,
Yeah.
and we are on the prototype 20 or 30 of our grindstone and the cooling system and all the mechanisms. But we're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah. We were hoping to bring it with us to Japan this trip, but it's not ready for prime time. We have milled matcha that looks like matcha,
Oh,
and it's the cooling system's not the greatest yet, so it didn't taste great compared to our reference sample, which was Isuzu milled, but the color was correct and the particle size was about right. Like when you do the
that's
streak
great.
test, you couldn't tell. That's progress.
But were you able to reach the your goal of the 5 micron size?
Yeah, we had a very crude way of measuring it. We need to get it like officially lab tested.
Ah, yes, of course.
Through a grindometer, we got down to 5 microns.
Wow.
It looked like the distribution bit, like we were a little coarser than Ishizu. So we have to work through that.
It's getting there.
It's getting there
Stay tuned.
slowly.
Yeah. Very
It's
excited.
actually very difficult to make sure it doesn't get too hot, and very difficult to make sure it can grind fast enough.
Yeah,
Mm.
they all, in a way, contradicting each other.
Yeah, everything is fighting itself in this system.
Yeah, if you want to mill faster, the temperature is going to rise, and if you exert more pressure, then you won't be able to mill that fast because you have larger torque.
Well,
And
You want finer particles. You need more pressure.
yeah,
It's all very. It's a big learning process. We have failed enough that we're finally learning more to hopefully reduce the risk of failure in the next version.
yep.
but
But it
definitely
has
very
been fun.
excited. I'd love to. Uh, hopefully, I can experience fresh ground matcha because I haven't experienced fresh ground matcha. Maybe the best one would be 6 day old matcha, but never freshly ground matcha. I don't really know how it tastes like.
But it's hard. I mean, even in Japan, like we're in Kyoto, I don't think there's anywhere where we could go in this city to get day old matcha. Like it's like not a thing here either. It seems to be really being pioneered in the States and I guess a little bit in Thailand from
Hmm.
people that have very bravely and I don't know, it's not a good word, and
Well, I would say brave is a good word.
Brave is a pretty good.
Spending that
Yes,
much money importing an
yes,
issue all the way from
yeah,
Japan, that needs some
very much.
courage.
Yes,
So it's I don't know, it's such a new concept. It's yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. No, we're working on it, and we're gonna do a little tour with the machine once it's ready. So we'll certainly pass to the Philippines,
Mhm.
yay. Yeah,
face to face, and
yes.
Yeah, we'll share
I
some
love
matcha.
to tour you around to different cafes and especially those who already started using matcha.
Awesome.
oh, that'd be great. So before we wrap up, how have your own preferences changed as you have gotten into matcha? And sort of how is your background, I guess, in music and in Urasenke, sort of influenced like the way you initially approached it, and how is your perception of enjoying matcha just in your own personal journey? How has that changed over the past few years?
At the beginning of my matcha journey, I used to consume usucha a lot. I
Mhm.
think it's the same story of being able to consume a lot of pure, being so more of a matcha purist, usucha Nazi.
Okay.
And then definitely I was able to see that more people had to adjust my preference as well because I am into the matcha business. That more people would appreciate matcha in latte form. So before I used to consume matcha only as a sucha and really dislike the idea of a latte because it's such a waste. So and now whenever I drink latte, I'd be very critical about the taste
Mm.
because there's already so many things going on in my mind when I drink latte. Like how does the matcha fare with the different ingredients and the balance of the flavors? So it definitely changed. Like from being very much into pure tea, now transition to matcha latte because this is how I believe most people enjoy matcha and will be enjoying matcha in the future, especially in the Philippines where matcha is still very new. I am trying to grow with how the market is approaching matcha. So, for example, my preference when it comes to being precise, for example, when I started my matcha journey, I only have a big matcha set, like the chawan, the, the scoop, and then, of course, the matcha. And that's it. I'd consume it every day. But as I dove deeper into matcha and my journey progressed, I realized this need to be precise with the measurements. So I invested on a weighing scale and a temperature controlled kettle so I can recreate the same experience and the same taste and I can record it and for me to have enough data so I can share it to the people I work with. So
Hmm.
definitely that changed from being usual matcha consumer of not having any equipment to do precise measurements, and now it shifted to making sure that I I record the experience by using these equipment like the weighing scale and the temperature controlled kettle. So that I was my preference has shifted in that sense.
Yeah. Well, being yeah, replicating is so important.
Mhm.
I've discovered too. It's like if you don't measure or weigh the matcha, like
Mm,
you know, it's really hard to tell the difference between like I don't know half a gram sometimes by just looking at the powder volume.
Mhm.
But like it's if you're using a 2 gram dose, you go a little bit higher. It's like a 20% increase, and
Yeah.
I see so many of these precision scoop, and I'm like, it's very interesting that people are very much into this type of tool when they can actually buy a weighing scale. Actually, that's one of
yeah.
my questions to you guys because I would love to know if you also plan to design something for weighing matcha. Yeah,
It's
because right
funny you
now
say
Yes,
that.
we
we're using okay because
yeah, we
currently we're very much into using the weighing scale for coffee. but it's
Mm.
Yep.
still very, it's not very accurate. So I'd
Yeah,
love to have an equipment that will be used for weighing matcha, almost like air-like weight.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very difficult. Weighing and dosing matcha is not that easy because the quantity is not very
The
large.
sensitivity that you
Yeah.
need a very sensitive scale, but you're also working with like a very heavy bowl and a lot of water.
Hmm.
And like usually scales either can support a lot of weight and are less sensitive, or they're
Ultra sensitive.
max 100 grams.
Yeah, or they need a lot of like they need a very ideal usage environment to be able to do it correctly. At least for the current technology, they're usually used in pharmaceuticals. You weigh the medicine powder, and they need to be on a very very flat surface, and you oftentimes need to put a little protection chamber on top of it, like to prevent any airflow to influence the weight. So
But we are working on something with the right compromises between cost and accuracy
yeah.
that is specifically for matcha. And actually, our goal is to have a sifter built in. So you can ask for a certain quantity. And then basically, the value proposition to a business or a consumer is you just don't have to touch dry matcha powder. Like you put the matcha in, it sits in there, and it sifts and doses it. And then, boom, it's in your vessel, and then you just use it.
Maybe a good addition to the matcha mill.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It will probably be separate product in the beginning,
Yes, oh
but
yeah, of course.
yeah, but we might incorporate them
Yeah,
together.
that's the dream where it's
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
So you say, I want 2 grams, it fresh mill, so it finishes.
Wow, such a dream.
It's a more difficult and potentially expensive problem.
Hmm.
Actually, we noticed this when we were weighing our fresh milled matcha. When it's running very slow, if it just slowly enters the scale can't register it, which was wild to me. So if it's going in like, I don't know, like zero point 0.1 grams or even less at a time, because it's so little weight, whatever the trigger mechanism is in the scale doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh, we're not milling any matcha. And then we go weigh it separately. It's like, oh, this is like 3 grams, which we could tell by looking at it.
It was a pretty expensive coffee scale.
Yeah, it was I think it's one of the Hario scales or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So far, we found that this is really the best scale for matcha, the
What's
acacia,
the brand?
acacia.
I think it's a Japanese brand.
Not
My,
entirely
I
sure.
don't think so actually.
Mm.
It's you can put a bowl on it and click tear, a pretty heavy bowl, and you get immediate zero point 0.1 gram resolution. Because a lot of these, if your bowl is too heavy, it doesn't start registering any weight until like 2 grams. I
Oh,
don't know
that's why.
why. It's very frustrating using some of the coffee scales for matcha. But so far, this one works.
Looking forward to that matcha weighing scheme in the future.
Oh,
Probably a year out by the time it's like full designed and manufactured.
yeah.
But yeah, we're slowly learning how this is all done and the products are designed. That was a new area for us too. So
But is the freshly ground matcha, is the weight of the freshly ground matcha different from the weight of the older matcha? Does
Good
it
question.
change?
oh, that's a great question.
Mhm.
Probably it's similar because the moisture content's low. I can't imagine where the mass would be transferred.
Yeah.
And it's not like coffee because coffee holds a lot of carbon dioxide. So I think like a couple percent of the weight will be lost in carbon dioxide as it degasses. But I don't think that exists within matcha.
Well, assuming it's perfectly sealed. If it's not, then it might absorb some water, moisture
Ah,
of
it
the
could
air.
go the other way. I do know that the volumetric measurement is not good. It's not very accurate because the density of matcha can change. Whether or not you sift it or not, like when you sift it, it gets a little more fluffy, so it gains some volume. For a cafe, a lot of cafes, it's probably fine, especially if you're not changing matcha supplies, like different matchas. But between matchas, it's the density can change. I
Mm.
mean, it's a problem with all volumetric based measurement.
Mm, yeah.
And a way a lot of these things are packaged too. Some people like vacuum seal it, and the matcha gets really tightly clumped.
Hmm.
But like others, it's a can and it's just in
Yes.
there, so it's little more fluffy.
It's also very different.
Yeah.
Because I think with that compaction, you gets a little more dense. And then also, I'm not sure, but I'm very convinced that different tencha has different densities. It's just a suspicion. It's a hunch of mine. But maybe between cultivars or different blends, it's just naturally going to be more or less dense, depending on like how thick the leaves were for the
Or
tencha,
the how fibrous the leaf is.
or how well they destemmed it.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to destem as much if you're ball milling.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe ball mill matcha might be more dense because you don't have to have just the tender leafy leaf parts. Because I bet there's two. Actually, it makes sense. It's very different. The leafy leaf is much less dense than the veins and stems and stuff.
Yeah.
Are you
And
familiar with the beads milling? Because I wonder if it's different from
ball
ball
milling.
milling. Is it different? Like
I
the
think
ball
it's the
milling
same.
and
It's the
beads?
same.
Same.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I saw that. I recently realized that where I source my matcha is actually using this beads mill, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know. I should have checked. But maybe that's why they are able to sell the matcha in a lower price, but still has good quality. I think it's very useful for my type of business right now because if I use an matcha, if I sell matcha ground in an issue, so it's going to be more expensive. But for
Yeah.
the business use, I think right now the one that I source, which is using beads mill, is just okay.
The only problem about bead or ball milling is that the powder morphology can be very round, so it would condense or precipitate very quickly in a usucha form. I guess it wouldn't matter too much in like a
And latte.
latte. Yeah.
More
But I wonder
viscous.
if you would taste a difference. If it's, I mean, would there be any texture difference? Like,
Well, if it's
can
sub,
you feel it?
yeah, if it's sub 20, sub 15 micron, it's pretty hard to detect the
Yeah.
texture difference for human tongue.
In the drink, yeah, I think there's less difference, but it forms a lower quality suspension. But when you touch it and feel it with your fingers, the ishiusu is very almost sticky. It's the way those particles interact with each other, sticky, clumpy. And the ball milled ones they have less cohesive forces because there's less surface area.
Yeah.
It's much more silky soft when you touch it dry. But
You usually don't dose dry powder into your mouth, yeah?
not usually. new matcha consumption movement started here. Right, just one big scoop.
I remember that's how I consume matcha the very first time I I had matcha. I just
Really?
that was a total fail because I put 2 tablespoons of matcha straight into the blender. I was thinking, why is it so clumpy? And then I just drank it because it was such a waste. So I was not able to sleep that night.
Yeah.
I bet. Although Brian from Matcha Matcha does,
Yeah.
he intakes dry powder,
Yeah.
which is
Wow.
a very interesting practice. Yeah.
He does something so cool, Brian. He's starting a new brand in Singapore called Matsu Matcha, and he first tastes a little bit of the dry powder. He takes 4 grams and he makes a koicha. He drinks half of the koicha and then makes an usecha. So he has it from most concentrated to least concentrated form. And I was like, oh wow, that's like a clever idea.
Very
Because you
interesting
get like
practice.
3 sensory data points for
Yes.
one. And yeah, so it's like, wow, I need to try this.
Yeah, I usually do that when I do koicha because it will be a wasted matcha if
There's
I
so
just
much
pour it.
extra.
Yeah. And I think you can do like put matcha in capsule form, so, and then pop.
Direct consumption.
Yes, you're immediately awake without tasting any bitterness, and doing all that preparation.
Wow. Next stage injection.
Oh, it's healthier than a caffeine pill.
Yeah, it would be interesting if somebody comes up with that matcha pill.
Matcha pill. Oh, I'm sure it exists in one of the supplements.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, health aid as
I don't want to know what's inside it.
definitely ultra high end uji matcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I also saw this matcha cubes. haven't tried it yet. I wonder how it really works. Like, it's already in cube form, and then you just drop it in the water. Maybe you shake
Yeah, I
it.
saw that too. I've never talked to anyone who's tasted it, but I read through some of the reviews, and some of the reviewers were not very kind. But it's clever. I don't know, anything you can do to reduce the the
Preparation,
effort and
Yes.
friction.
headache and friction.
Mm.
Like you just bring in more consumers to the category,
Yeah.
and even within consumers in the category, like sometimes I don't want or cannot spend 10 to 15 minutes doing it
Yep.
properly. So
Mm.
it's like nice having options.
Yeah. Gotta need your last minute emergency matcha.
Yeah. Yes. Cool.
All right.
All right. I think that's all we have time for. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or giving us a rating. And thank you so much, Monique, for coming on. And really appreciate all of your time and knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you in the future.
Bye.